Meghan Markle snubbed by British Vogue.
British Vogue just released its first ever best dressed list, and with one quiet move, they sent a message that echoed far beyond fashion.
We have seen so many things from Catherine.
And guess who's number one?
Right at the top sat Catherine, the Princess of Wales, calm, composed, and somehow commanding every front row without even needing to show up.
Catherine has really been gifting us with her sartorial choices.
That choice alone turned heads, but it wasn't the moment that got people talking. The real shock came shortly after, when Vogue published a second list featuring 55 names they believe are shaping the culture right now.
British Vogue has unveiled its first ever 50 best dressed list, a landmark celebration of the figures who have defined and elevated style over the past year.
Actors, musicians, designers, and industry insiders filled out the rankings. Everyone had a slot, everyone had a title, and every lane seemed accounted for, except one.
And I think we can all agree when it comes to clothing, unfortunately, even though there's a mystery as to why she does it, we can all agree that Meghan Markle doesn't belong on any kind of best dressed list.
Meghan Markle wasn't there. Not listed, not mentioned, not even tucked into the footnotes. No appearance at all. And silence from Vogue isn't accidental. When they ignore you, it's not passive, it's the message. Because in this world, being excluded speaks louder than being dragged. There's no dramatic exit, no door slamming. Behind you, just the soft click of a door quietly closing. That's how power moves when it no longer needs to prove itself. Here's where most people miss the point. This wasn't about clothing. Vogue made it clear from the beginning. This wasn't a list about hems, shoes, or color choices. The real focus was on presence, how someone carries influence without chasing it. The people they chose aren't shouting to be seen. They're already impossible to ignore. In this space, style doesn't come from trying too hard. It comes from knowing when not to.
If she was to ever be on one, I think you and I would know that she paid to be on one. But as we can see with Catherine from this one photo, I mean, Catherine is always dressed impeccable, never wrinkled.
Confidence without explanation, control without the need for constant validation. Vogue rewards that kind of restraint. They don't celebrate noise, they measure who can hold attention by doing the least. Once you see that, the list stops looking like fashion content and starts to feel more like a chart of who holds quiet authority, who gets brought in, who still earns trust, and who no longer matches the room they once walked into so easily. Catherine wasn't just featured, she was elevated. Vogue didn't just say she had style, they gave her a title, an eternal influencer. Not trendy, not seasonal, permanent. She stood beside names like Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, and Victoria Beckham, women whose cultural weight doesn't shift with headlines. Vogue praised Catherine's loyalty to British designers, her preference for vintage looks, and her ability to impact a brand's fate just by wearing something once.
So we can really see why Vogue decided to do this. And you think to yourself, what's Meghan gonna do? How's she gonna respond? How's she gonna put out a story, call someone, put together?
No PR push, no campaign, just quiet, steady power. They even pointed out that her influence will likely expand as she begins issuing royal warrants, which turns her fashion choices into direct financial boosts for brands. Her effect on the industry isn't just cultural, it's economic. And right there, the contrast couldn't be clearer. One woman rose without asking. The other didn't even make the list. What made this moment so sharp wasn't just Meghan's absence, it was how deliberate it felt. A woman who once graced magazine covers across the globe, whose wedding dress sparked fashion breakdowns for weeks, was now missing from a list that included almost every other style-forward public figure. Vogue doesn't overlook names like that. They don't forget. They choose. And this choice wasn't about oversight, it was about definition.
What are you gonna do? You're gonna get some glamour shots again, Meghan, just like you did with Harper's Bazaar because they said no to you after 5 years and they finally said yes? Probably.
In elite spaces, these lists aren't just about applause, they're about clarity. They answer quiet questions like, who still holds space? Who represents something enduring? And who's drifted from that conversation entirely? Every person on the list had a purpose. Amal Clooney was credited for sticking to a look that fits her. Musicians made it for blending sound and image into something bigger than either. Actors stood out for being bold, strange, or confident. Even the men had distinct lanes. Nobody was thrown in just to fill a slot. Everyone had a reason. Which brings us back to Meghan. The reason she wasn't included isn't because no one thought of her, it's because There wasn't a clear place to put her, and when that happens at the Vogue level, it's not just about style, it's about perception. Who are you right now? What do you represent? And more importantly, what do you bring that actually lasts?
Princess Catherine's place on the list feels inevitable. Yeah, absolutely, because she actually dresses very well. And this isn't something where we're lying, like, oh yeah, it's because we like Princess Catherine and we don't like Meghan. No, it's not that. Not at all.
The magazine didn't explain the omission. They didn't need to. That's how institutions speak when the answer is already known. Silence doesn't mean nothing happened, it means the decision was made quietly, without fanfare, and with certainty. What this really exposed is the difference between attention and favor. Meghan still gets attention. That's never been her problem. But favor, that's something else. Favor is subtle. It moves behind closed doors, it decides who gets calls returned, who gets offers extended, and who's quietly removed from the invite list. And that kind of favor can't be demanded. It has to be held. Behind the scenes, according to people close to the situation, Meghan didn't just wait to be brought back into Vogue's spotlight, she reached out. But this wasn't a casual ask. It came with a list of terms: top-tier feature, full creative control, say over images, quotes, and the story itself. Not collaboration, control, and that's where things shifted.
Princess Catherine's wardrobe is amazing. She's amazing when it comes to getting or having her dresses tailored, perfect. They're not too long. They're not all huge like Meghan's. For some reason, I don't know why Meghan continues to do that.
Vogue works with powerful women all the time. That's their brand. But they rarely hand over the pen. Their editors decide the story. Not even the biggest global stars get to write their own narrative in those pages. Control like that signals something more than confidence. It reads as a need to manage the message. In an industry built on mystique and trust, needing too much control can start to look like insecurity. Vogue isn't in the rescue business. They don't rebuild reputations. They protect their own. So when a public figure comes in, not just asking for coverage, but expecting to direct it, the answer is rarely loud, it's quiet, but final. That quiet no carries weight. In the fashion world, being told no in private says more than any front page takedown ever could. It's not a punishment, it's a reset of the relationship. It means the access you once had is no longer guaranteed. It means trust has shifted. There was a time when Meghan's presence felt electric. She was fresh, unpredictable, and carried that sense of mystery that fashion loves. But that feeling doesn't last forever, especially when every move starts to feel calculated.
I think that when it comes to Meghan's clothes, I think she does it on purpose so that way you and I will talk about it. That's the only thing I can think of, because the other idea of that is that Meghan believes she looks good.
Overexposure doesn't equal influence. In fact, the more the public sees the gears turning behind the curtain, the less they care about the performance. Meghan's appearances began to feel like statements instead of moments. Every outfit, every photo, every smile seemed designed to say something, to signal purpose. But fashion doesn't reward visible effort. It celebrates effort you never notice. And that's the issue. The mystique faded. When that happens, even legacy platforms start stepping back, not with drama, but with distance. Leaving the royal family was supposed to open new doors. It was meant to be freedom, possibility, a chance to redefine everything on her own terms. And at first it was. There were media deals, high-profile interviews, and global anticipation for what she would build next. But the returns didn't always match the promises. Some projects launched with big headlines, then quietly disappeared. Public excitement cooled. Behind the scenes, things shifted. Invitations became slower. Relationships turned cautious. The glow that came from being part of the royal machine started to fade, and what remained had to stand on its own. That's where things got harder. Because much of Meghan's original influence wasn't just about who she was, it was about where she stood.
If Meghan is not doing it because she wants people to talk about her, you're talking about some serious delusion.
The palace gave her a platform, the crown gave her weight. Without that, the same moves felt different. They required more effort, but delivered less. Freedom came, but so did distance. And in spaces like fashion and media, distance can be dangerous. These industries value consistency and stability. When someone becomes polarizing or unpredictable, support doesn't always vanish, but it becomes conditional. This isn't about whether Meghan is talented or ambitious. That's never been in question. It's about positioning. When someone steps into conflict with the very structures that once elevated them, attention might follow, but favor rarely does. And without favor, doors don't close dramatically. They just stop opening altogether. This is where the story shifts from style to strategy, because Vogue's list didn't just reflect who looked good, it showed who still fits, not in clothes, but in rooms where influence is decided.
Catherine's blend of modern trends and traditions has set a new benchmark for royal style in 2025. Yeah, you hear that, Meghan? Royal style, not you. She appears alongside and this is literally the name for her. They give her this name, Eternal Influencer. And that's because Meghan's whole deal is supposed to be influencer.
When they named Catherine an eternal influencer, they weren't just handing out compliments. They were confirming that her presence means more than fashion. It signals trust. Catherine's style choices are consistent, yes, but more importantly, they're intentional. Her loyalty to British designers, her preference for timeless pieces, and her ability to lift a brand without ever saying a word creates an image of stability. One appearance in a specific coat or dress can change a designer's entire season. And that kind of impact isn't about hype, it's about reliability. The Kate effect isn't just a phrase tossed around by tabloids. Inside the fashion industry, it's a measurable force. Designers have watched their sales spike within hours of her being photographed. Stores report sellouts. Brands that were struggling suddenly see new attention, not because of ads or press pushes, but because she wore something once without fanfare. And that influence doesn't just touch fashion, it moves markets. Vogue understands this in numbers, not feelings. Their lists aren't about who's popular on Instagram or who trends for a week. They're about who shapes long-term momentum. Catherine doesn't post for clout. She shows up and systems shift. That's why she's valuable. That's why she earned the crown spot. Now compare that with Meghan's current position. Once, her image was the story. Now the image feels managed, often overly so. What once felt intriguing has become predictable. Public appearances carry a sense of polish that leaves little room for surprise. And fashion, for all its love of control, still craves a little unpredictability. Every smile, every pose, every carefully curated moment has started to blur together. And when audiences can see the effort, they stop feeling the impact. That's where Meghan's narrative hit a wall, not because she lost relevance entirely, but because her influence became harder to separate from her strategy. And in elite fashion circles, influence without spontaneity starts to lose its shine. Catherine doesn't need to chase these moments. The moments follow her, not because she demands them, but because the institutions around her still believe she represents something steady, something that won't shift next week. This isn't about personality, it's about perception. Meghan wanted a place at the table, but she also wanted to reshape the rules. Vogue chose to keep playing by their own. That quiet decision from Vogue wasn't a scandal, but it was a statement. They didn't drag Meghan, they didn't dismiss her publicly, they just moved on, and in this world, being left out is the clearest message of all. Because fashion doesn't shout when it makes a choice, it whispers, and the industry listens. Catherine's rise isn't about chasing relevance, it's about becoming part of the system that decides what matters. Vogue placed her among women who don't reinvent themselves every season because they don't need to. They've built something that lasts. She joined names like Naomi Campbell and Victoria Beckham, not just for her clothes, but for the consistency behind them. That's the part that's easy to miss. Catherine didn't rush anything. She didn't ask for attention. She simply kept showing up, staying steady, and letting her influence speak for itself. Vogue didn't just reward style, they rewarded restraint. In a world that's always loud, quiet consistency feels like leadership. Meghan, by contrast, wanted the spotlight, but also wanted to control how it looked. That's not unusual, but when the control becomes the story, the impact fades. What once felt fresh starts to feel forced. And in elite circles, that change doesn't come with headlines. It comes with silence. Favor isn't loud. It doesn't post on social media or trend on Twitter. Favor happens in backrooms, in invites, in inclusion. And once you lose it, it doesn't come back with PR. It comes back with trust, and that's harder to win than attention. This isn't about who wore the better dress. It's about how two women, both with global visibility and royal ties, found themselves on opposite sides of a cultural shift. One leaned into the institution and gained quiet power. The other tried to control the narrative and watched the room slowly turn. Meghan's absence wasn't an oversight. It was the result of choices made over time. Catherine's placement wasn't just a nod to good fashion, it was recognition of long-term influence that doesn't need headlines to matter. When Vogue speaks, people in power listen. And what they said, without needing to print it, was that stability, trust, and subtle influence matter more now than noise. Meghan didn't lose her platform. She just misread what it takes to keep it. In fashion, as in power, presence matters. But timing, trust, and quiet authority matter more. This isn't the end of Meghan's story, but it is a turning point. The door didn't slam. It didn't even creak. It just stopped opening. And the next move, as always in this world, won't be announced. It'll be noticed.